The janitor overheard the CEO speaking Arabic and gave a reply that stopped the whole boardroom. The early morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nexus Technologies' 87th floor conference room, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Samir Benali moved silently across the carpeted floor, his grey uniform blending into the background as he emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces. The cleaning cart's squeaky wheel needed oil again, he noted mentally. At 52, he had perfected the art of invisibility, moving through the spaces of the powerful without disturbing the air around them. The digital clock on the wall read 5:47 a.m. In just over an hour, this room would host what the whispering executives had called the deal of the decade, a potential partnership with Al-Farsi Investments, led by the notoriously particular Khalid Al-Farsi himself. Samir had overheard fragments of conversations all week, the translators being flown in from Washington, the specialized catering, the rehearsed pitches. "Make sure everything is immaculate," Mrs. Henderson, the executive assistant, had instructed him yesterday. "Mr. Al-Farsi is particular." She hadn't looked at him directly, instead scanning the room as if addressing the furniture. As Samir adjusted the blinds, he caught his reflection in the glass, grey-streaked beard, neatly trimmed, deep-set eyes carrying the weight of dreams deferred. 23 years ago, he had been Dr. Samir Benali, a linguistics professor at Al Akhawain University in Ifrane, Morocco, fluent in Arabic, French, English and Berber. Now he was simply the cleaning guy on floor 87. The transition had not been by choice. Political complications, a regime change, and the wrong friendships had forced him to flee Morocco with nothing but a small suitcase and his doctorate diploma. America had promised refuge, but delivered reality. Credentials that weren't recognized, references who couldn't be contacted, and bills that wouldn't wait for validation. Samir finished his routine and pushed his cart toward the service elevator. As he waited, Jessica Chen, Nexus's young marketing director, hurried past, arms full of presentation folders. "Holding the door?" she asked, not really looking at him. "Of course." He pressed the button to keep the doors open. "Thanks," she said, stepping in. Then, surprisingly, she added, "Big day today, huh?" Samir nodded politely. "So I hear. The whole executive team is freaking out. Apparently this Al-Farsi guy refuses to speak English during negotiations. Some power play thing. We've got 3 translators coming, but I heard he speaks this super classical formal Arabic that's hard to translate accurately." She shook her head. "Corporate politics, right?" The elevator stopped at the 65th floor, and Jessica stepped out with a casual, "Have a good one," that evaporated into the air before the doors closed. Samir continued down to the basement level where he stored his cleaning supplies. In the small break room, he found his colleague Eduardo nursing a coffee. "You look like you're thinking too hard again, Professor," Eduardo said, using the nickname he'd given Samir years ago after discovering his academic background. "Just remembering," Samir replied, pouring himself tea from his thermos. "Dangerous business, that." Eduardo laughed. "Thinking about the university again?" Samir nodded. "Today marks exactly 15 years since I started working here. 15 years of cleaning up after people who don't see me." Eduardo's expression softened. "Hey, we've all got stories, amigo. You're not the only one who left something behind." He gestured to the photograph taped inside his locker, Eduardo in medical scrubs, somewhere in Venezuela. "I know," Samir said, "but sometimes I wonder if I've disappeared completely. The person I was, the knowledge, the expertise, did it vanish when I picked up a mop?" "It's still there," Eduardo said firmly. "Just waiting for the right moment." Their supervisor, Tom, poked his head in. "Benali, I need you back on 87. Someone spilled coffee all over the conference room. They're having some big-shot meeting in 30 minutes. Samir closed his locker. "Duty calls." As he rode back up, Samir thought about Jessica's words. Classical Arabic, Fusha, was indeed challenging for modern translators who often specialized in regional dialects. Al-Farsi was known to be traditional, educated at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, where the purest form of the language was still taught with reverence. When Samir reached the conference room, he found chaos. A nervous junior executive had indeed spilled coffee across presentation materials. The room now contained a dozen people in expensive suits, all moving with the frantic energy of impending judgment. Samir quietly set to work cleaning the spill. Around him, conversations overlapped. The translators are stuck in traffic. Al-Farsi's assistant just called. They're 10 minutes out. Has anyone reviewed the cultural briefing I sent? Samir finished cleaning and was about to leave when CEO Richard Maxwell entered the room, his commanding presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. People, Maxwell said. Let's keep it together. This partnership means expanding into markets we've been trying to crack for years. The Middle Eastern tech sector is booming, and Al-Farsi Investments is our ticket in. He straightened his tie. Where are the damn translators? Still en route, sir, someone replied. 20 minutes at least. Maxwell cursed under his breath. Perfect. Just perfect. As executives settled into their seats, Samir pushed his cart toward the door. He should leave. This wasn't his world. These weren't his problems. Yet something kept him lingering by the exit, a strange feeling of standing at a crossroads. The receptionist's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Al-Farsi and his team have arrived. They're on their way up. Maxwell straightened his posture. Everyone, positions. First impressions matter. Where's the... He stopped, noticing Samir. Janitor, we're done here. You can go. Samir nodded and moved his cart into the hallway, but instead of leaving, he positioned himself near the water cooler, just outside the glass doors. From there, he could see into the conference room without being obvious. Minutes later, Khalid Al-Farsi strode in, flanked by 3 associates. He was younger than Samir had expected, perhaps early 40s, with sharp eyes that scanned the room with calculated precision. The introductions began, stiff and formal. Maxwell gestured to the empty chairs. Please, make yourselves comfortable. We're so honored to have you here. I understand your translators will be joining us shortly. Al-Farsi nodded but remained standing. Then, in perfect classical Arabic, he said something that made Samir's spine straighten. We shall see if this meeting is worth the time I have allocated. I have found that Americans often promise oceans but deliver droplets. The Nexus executive smiled awkwardly, clearly not understanding. Al-Farsi's associates remained expressionless. Maxwell cleared his throat. I'm sorry, but our translators are running a bit late. Perhaps we could begin with some refreshments while we wait? Al-Farsi switched to English, his accent thick but words precise. Of course. Delays. Always delays with Western companies. He turned to his associates and, again in Arabic, said, They are unprepared, as expected. Perhaps we should reconsider the Singapore offer. Samir felt a familiar tension in his chest, the frustration of watching miscommunication unfold, knowing he could bridge the gap. For 15 years, he had remained invisible, silent, accepting his place. But standing there, watching the beginning of a failed meeting that could cost jobs and opportunities, something shifted inside him. Before he could reconsider, Samir stepped back into the conference room. The click of the conference room door closing behind Samir seemed unnaturally loud. Several heads turned, annoyed at the interruption. Maxwell shot him a pointed look that clearly said, Not now. Samir cleared his throat. Excuse me, he said quietly. We're in a meeting, Maxwell said, not bothering to hide his irritation. Whatever cleaning needs to be done can wait. Samir hesitated, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. 15 years of silence pressed against his chest. Then Al-Farsi said something else in Arabic to his associates, something about Western arrogance and wasted opportunities, and Samir made his decision. "Mr. Al-Farsi," Samir said in perfect classical Arabic, his voice finding its old professor's cadence, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Nexus Technologies has prepared extensively for this meeting, and while the translators have been delayed, the respect for you and your company is genuine." The room froze. Al-Farsi's eyebrows rose sharply, and his associates exchanged glances. The Nexus executives stared at Samir as if he had suddenly materialized from thin air. "Who is this man?" Al-Farsi asked in Arabic, studying Samir with new interest. "I am merely an employee of the building," Samir replied with the formal humility his culture dictated. "But I could not stand by and watch a potential partnership dissolve over a simple matter of language." Al-Farsi approached Samir, examining him with newfound curiosity. "Your Arabic is exceptional, the classical form, not the colloquial. Where did you learn to speak with such precision?" "Al-Akawain University," Samir answered. "I was a professor of linguistics there many years ago." Al-Farsi switched to English. "And now you clean offices in New York?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Maxwell and the other executives seemed to be processing what was happening, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief. "Life takes unexpected turns," Samir replied simply, also in English. "We all make choices and face consequences." Maxwell stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "I apologize for the confusion, Mr. Al-Farsi. Samir he works in our maintenance department. I wasn't aware of his linguistic abilities." "Clearly," Al-Farsi said dryly. He turned back to Samir and continued in Arabic. "Tell me, former professor, what do you know of this company's proposal?" Samir hesitated. "Only what I have overheard in passing, sir. It would not be appropriate for me to claim knowledge of business matters." Al-Farsi nodded, then addressed Maxwell. "This man will translate for us until your professionals arrive." It wasn't a request. Maxwell blinked rapidly, then forced a smile. "Of course, if that's what you prefer." He turned to Samir, lowering his voice. "Can you actually do this?" "Yes," Samir said simply. Within minutes, Samir found himself seated at the conference table, his grey uniform stark against the sea of suits. He translated Maxwell's opening presentation with precision, finding himself slipping back into the academic mindset with surprising ease. When technical terms arose, he provided cultural context that made Al-Farsi nod with approval. As the meeting progressed, Samir noticed Jessica Chen watching him with undisguised fascination. The other executives gradually shifted from skepticism to cautious appreciation as Al-Farsi became increasingly engaged in the discussion. During a brief coffee break, Maxwell cornered Samir by the refreshment table. "Where the hell did that come from? You've worked here for how long?" 15 years today, Samir replied. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair. 15 years. "And in all that time, you never thought to mention you speak fluent Arabic, that you were a professor?" "You never asked," Samir said simply. "My application listed my qualifications. No one ever looked beyond previous employment, custodial services." Maxwell had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Right. Well, the official translators just arrived, so you can go back to your regular duties." Samir nodded and stood to leave, but Al-Farsi called across the room in Arabic. "The professor stays," he said firmly. "I prefer his translation. It carries understanding, not just words." Maxwell hesitated, then nodded tightly. "Of course." For the next 2 hours, Samir facilitated a conversation that gradually transformed from cautious negotiation to genuine exchange. He caught cultural nuances that the newly arrived translators missed, explained idioms, and once even corrected a potential misunderstanding about investment terms that could have derailed the entire deal. By the meeting's end, Al-Farsi was leaning forward, engaged and nodding. "Your company's proposal has merit," he said in Arabic, which Samir translated. "I see potential here that was not evident in the materials alone." After signatures on preliminary agreements and handshakes all around, Al-Farsi approached Samir directly. "You have an extraordinary gift," he said in English, "one that should not be hidden behind a cleaning cart." He reached into his pocket and handed Samir a business card. "When you decide you're ready to be seen again, call this number." As the room emptied, Samir remained seated, the business card heavy in his hand. Through the glass walls, he could see people gathered in small groups, occasionally glancing his way. His phone buzzed with a text from Eduardo. "What's happening up there? Rumors flying everywhere." Jessica Chen approached, coffee in hand. "So," she said, sitting beside him, "a linguistics professor." Samir shrugged. "Former professor. Why didn't you ever say anything?" The question was simple, but loaded with the complexity of immigrant experience, of starting over, of invisibility. "Would it have mattered?" Samir asked. "In 15 years, how many times have you or anyone else asked me a question about myself? Not about cleaning schedules or supply orders, about me?" Jessica looked down at her coffee. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. That's a fair point." "It's not your fault," Samir said. "It's how the world works. We see what we expect to see." Maxwell reappeared in the doorway. "Samir? A word, please." Samir followed the CEO to his corner office with its sweeping views of Manhattan. For the first time, Maxwell gestured for him to sit in one of the leather chairs facing the desk. "I'm not sure what to say," Maxwell began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "You essentially saved a $300 million deal today." "I simply translated," Samir said. "No," Maxwell shook his head. "You did much more than translate. You connected two worlds." He leaned forward. "Why are you working as a janitor with your qualifications?" Samir had answered this question in his head 1,000 times over the years. "When I came to this country, my credentials weren't recognized. I needed work. One job led to another, and eventually," he gestured to his uniform, "you become what others see you as." Maxwell nodded slowly. Al-Farsi was impressed, very impressed. "He specifically mentioned you in our private conversation afterward." He paused. "We need someone with your skills, Samir. Not just language, but cultural understanding. This partnership is just the beginning of our Middle Eastern expansion." Samir felt something stir inside him, hope, perhaps, or vindication. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A new position. Cultural liaison officer for our international division. Proper salary, benefits, office on the executive floor." Maxwell named a figure that made Samir blink. "We need you, Samir. Today made that abundantly clear." As the words hung in the air, Samir thought about the invisible line he had crossed today, from background fixture to foreground player. He thought about Eduardo, about all the other invisible workers with hidden depths, about 15 years of silence. "I'll consider it," he said finally, "but I have conditions." The October rain drummed against the windows of Samir's new office on the 86th floor. 3 weeks had passed since the day everything changed. His desk, sleek, modern, with a view of the Hudson River, still felt foreign beneath his fingertips. The nameplate read, "Samir Benali, Ph.D., Director of Cultural Integration," a title Maxwell had upgraded after their negotiation. Samir adjusted his tie, still uncomfortable with the constraint after years in a maintenance uniform. His phone buzzed with a text from Eduardo. "Lunch at 1, can't wait to hear about your Dubai trip." A smile tugged at Samir's lips. Eduardo had been promoted too, now supervising the maintenance staff with a substantial raise, one of Samir's non-negotiable conditions. Nexus had also implemented a company-wide initiative to identify and utilize hidden talents among all employees, regardless of position. Another condition. His assistant Mira, yes, he had an assistant now, knocked lightly on his open door. "Your 10 o'clock is here, Dr. Benali." "Thank you," Samir said. "And please, just Samir is fine." Mira smiled. "The Al-Farsi team sent over the revised proposal for the Cairo office. I've put it on your tablet." As she left, Samir turned to the floor-to-ceiling window. 3 weeks, and everything had changed. Yet nothing had. He was still the same person, with the same knowledge and experiences. Only now, people listened when he spoke. The transition hadn't been seamless. Some executives resented his sudden elevation, whispering about affirmative action and publicity stunts. Others were awkwardly overcompensating, inviting him to every meeting as if to prove their inclusivity. Maxwell himself seemed torn between genuine appreciation for Samir's skills and discomfort with what his presence represented. The talent they had overlooked for years, mopping their floors and emptying their trash. Jessica Chen appeared in the doorway. Ready to strategize for the Dubai conference? Their working relationship had evolved into something like friendship. Jessica had been one of the few executives who seemed genuinely mortified by the company's failure to recognize Samir's potential, and she had made efforts to engage with him as a colleague, not a curiosity. "Almost," Samir replied. "Just reviewing the Cairo proposals." Jessica sat across from him, tablet in hand. "I heard Al-Farsi specifically requested you lead the negotiation team." "He did," Samir confirmed. "Though I suspect it's as much about making a point as it is about my qualifications." "A valid point," Jessica said. "By the way, the video from your cultural sensitivity workshop last week has gone viral internally. HR wants to make it mandatory viewing for all new hires." Samir nodded, still uncomfortable with his newfound visibility. The workshop had been his idea, helping executives understand the cultural contexts of their new Middle Eastern partners. He had drawn on his academic background, presenting case studies and language lessons. The response had been overwhelmingly positive. "There's something else," Jessica said, her tone shifting. "The New York Times wants to interview you for a feature on immigrant professionals in the corporate world. PR thinks it would be great exposure for Nexus." Samir felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "I'm not interested in being a poster child for corporate redemption." "I told them you'd say that," Jessica smiled. "But consider it maybe. Your story could help others in similar situations." Before Samir could respond, his phone rang, the special tone he'd assigned to international calls. The screen displayed Khalid Al-Farsi. "I should take this," he said. Jessica nodded and left, closing the door behind her. "Mr. Al-Farsi," Samir answered in Arabic. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Professor Benali," Al-Farsi replied warmly. "I trust the new position is treating you well." "It's an adjustment," Samir admitted, "but a welcome one. I've been reviewing your proposal for the cultural training programs. Impressive work. It reminds me of your published papers from Al-Akawain." "Yes," Al-Farsi continued, hearing Samir's surprise. "I did my research after our meeting. Your work on linguistic anthropology was groundbreaking." Samir felt a complex emotion surge through him. Pride mingled with sorrow for the academic career he had lost. That was another lifetime. "Perhaps," Al-Farsi said, "or perhaps just an intermission. Which brings me to my purpose for calling. I'm establishing a new cultural institute in New York, a bridge between Western and Middle Eastern business communities. I need someone who understands both worlds to lead it." Samir's grip tightened on the phone. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Al-Farsi?" I'm offering you a return to your true calling, Professor. Teaching, research, publishing, with resources beyond anything you had at the university. And, Al-Farsi paused, a platform to ensure that others with stories like yours don't spend 15 years invisible. After the call ended, Samir sat motionless, staring at the rain-streaked windows. Al-Farsi's offer was generous, exciting, a chance to reclaim the academic identity he had mourned for so long. Yet something held him back. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Eduardo stood in the doorway, a brown paper bag in hand. "I know lunch isn't for an hour, but I brought you something," Eduardo said, placing the bag on Samir's desk. Inside was a small brass nameplate, clearly handmade. It read, "Professor Samir Benali, never invisible." Eduardo shrugged at Samir's questioning look. "My nephew makes them in his shop. Thought you might like it for your desk at home, a reminder." Samir ran his fingers over the engraved letters. "Thank you." "So," Eduardo said, sitting down, "word in the break room is that Al-Farsi's trying to poach you." Samir raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "Maintenance knows everything," Eduardo grinned. "So, you taking it?" "I don't know," Samir admitted. "It's what I always wanted, to return to academia, to teaching." Eduardo studied him. But I'm not the same person I was in Morocco. These 15 years, they changed me. Working alongside you, seeing the company from the bottom up." Samir gestured to the office around them. "I have a unique perspective now, one that could make a real difference here." "You already have," Eduardo said. 3 janitors promoted to administrative positions based on their college degrees, language courses for maintenance staff, the talent identification program. He leaned forward. "But you gotta decide, is changing Nexus enough, or do you want to change the whole system?" The question lingered in Samir's mind as he prepared for his afternoon meeting with Maxwell. The CEO had been increasingly reliant on Samir's cultural insights as the Middle Eastern partnerships expanded. When Samir entered the executive conference room, the same one where everything had changed 3 weeks ago, he found Maxwell alone, reviewing documents. "Samir," Maxwell said, looking up. "Sit down, please." His expression was unusually serious. "Al-Farsi called me directly after speaking with you. He was very transparent about his offer." "I haven't made any decisions," Samir said carefully. Maxwell nodded. "I wouldn't expect you to rush something like this, but I want to be equally transparent." He slid a folder across the table. "This is our counteroffer, Executive Vice President of International Relations, double your current salary, equity options, board seat." Samir left the folder unopened. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why fight to keep me? 3 weeks ago I was invisible to you. Now I'm worth a board seat?" Maxwell didn't flinch from the direct question. "Because I was wrong. Because you've demonstrated value I never imagined. Because losing you to Al-Farsi would be both a business disaster and a personal embarrassment." He paused. "And because you've changed things around here, Samir. Changed how we see ourselves and each other. That's worth fighting for." Later that evening, Samir found himself back on the 87th floor, standing in the now empty conference room where his life had pivoted. The cleaning staff had already been through. The tables gleamed, the trash bins were empty, the chairs perfectly aligned, the invisible work that made everything else possible. He thought about Al-Farsi's offer, prestigious, intellectually stimulating, a return to his academic roots. He thought about Maxwell's counteroffer, power, influence, the ability to change Nexus from within. Both paths offered validation, purpose, visibility. His phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Whatever you decide, we're behind you. Just don't forget where you came from." That was the heart of it, wasn't it? Where he came from. Not just Morocco or academia, but the basement break room, the squeaky cleaning cart, the years of invisibility that had taught him to see what others missed. Samir touched the window glass, leaving a fingerprint on the immaculate surface. Tomorrow, someone would clean it away. The thought sparked something in him, a third option. Neither Al-Farsi's institute nor Maxwell's executive suite. Something entirely his own. The community center on East 116th Street hummed with activity as Samir adjusted the projector. 6 months had passed since the day he had stepped out of invisibility, and life had taken yet another unexpected turn. "Professor, we're ready when you are," called Fatima, a young woman from Yemen who had been working as a hotel housekeeper despite having a degree in computer science. Samir nodded, surveying the classroom. 20 faces looked back at him. Immigrants from across the Middle East, North Africa and South Asia, doctors driving cabs, engineers working construction, teachers cleaning offices, all brilliant, all invisible, all searching for a way forward in their adopted country. "Today we continue with professional communication strategies," Samir began in English, then repeated in Arabic, then Urdu, thanks to his colleague Imran, a former university dean from Pakistan who now taught alongside him. This was The Visible Path, the organization Samir had founded 3 months ago after declining both Al-Farsi's and Maxwell's offers. Instead, he had negotiated a third option, a part-time position at Nexus as a cultural consultant with the company's financial backing for his new venture, helping skilled immigrants reclaim their professional identities. Al-Farsi, impressed by Samir's vision, had become the primary donor, providing the building and operational funding. "Sometimes the best way forward is neither this path nor that path, but a new path altogether," he had said when Samir presented his proposal. The center offered language training, credential evaluation, interview preparation, and perhaps most importantly, a network of corporations, including Nexus, committed to hiring from their program. In just 3 months, they had already placed 15 professionals in positions matching their qualifications. As Samir moved through the lesson, his phone vibrated with a text from Eduardo. "Board meeting at 3. Don't be late or Maxwell will start without you." Eduardo now served as operations director for the Visible Path, bringing his practical wisdom and management skills to the growing organization. Jessica had joined too, handling marketing and corporate outreach in her spare time. Even Maxwell had become an unlikely ally, opening doors at other companies and speaking publicly about Nexus's wake-up call. After class, Samir found Imran in the break room, reviewing student files. "The engineer from Syria, Bassam, he received 2 job offers yesterday," Imran reported. "One from Nexus, one from that architectural firm in Brooklyn." "Excellent," Samir said, pouring himself tea. "Has he decided?" "He's leaning toward the firm. Says it's a better match for his specialty." Imran closed the file. "You know, when I was cleaning bathrooms at the airport last year, I never imagined I'd be doing this now." Samir nodded, understanding completely. Life takes unexpected turns. "The reporter is here," Imran said, checking his watch. "In your office." Samir had finally agreed to the interview Jessica had mentioned months ago, but on his terms, focusing on the organization rather than his personal story and including other voices from the program. The reporter, Christine Wong from the New York Times, rose when Samir entered his modest office. "Dr. Benali, thank you for making time for this. Please call me Samir," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "And thank you for agreeing to our conditions for the interview." "Of course," Christine said, setting up her recorder. "Though I have to say, your personal journey is compelling. From professor to janitor to founding this organization, it's the kind of story that resonates." "My story is not unique," Samir replied. "Every person in this building has a similar tale of disruption, adaptation, and resilience. The only difference is that I had a moment of visibility in the right place, at the right time." Christine looked around the office, simple, functional, with a view of the Manhattan skyline. Yet you turned down two extremely lucrative offers to start this. Some might call that surprising. Samir smiled. Only if they believe status and salary are the primary measures of success. He gestured to the center beyond his office door. This work, helping others reclaim their identities, their skills, their visibility, this feels more like success to me than any corner office. The interview continued, with Christine asking thoughtful questions about the program's methodology, success rates, and future plans. Samir introduced her to several participants, each with their own powerful stories of invisible skills and renewed hope. Later, as they wrapped up, Christine asked one final question. If you could speak directly to other invisible workers out there, the janitors with PhDs, the cashiers with medical degrees, what would you tell them? Samir considered this carefully. I would say that your value doesn't change based on others' perception. Your knowledge, your experience, your humanity, these remain constant, whether you're in a boardroom or a basement. But I would also say, find ways to be seen. Not by compromising who you are, but by refusing to be defined by a uniform or a job title. After Christine left, Samir gathered his materials for the board meeting. The brass nameplate Eduardo had given him sat on his desk. Professor Samir Benali, never invisible. A daily reminder of both where he had been and where he refused to return. The Uber ride to Nexus headquarters was quick. As Samir passed through the gleaming lobby, security guards greeted him by name, some of the same guards who had barely noticed him for 15 years. The irony wasn't lost on him. In the elevator, a young woman in maintenance grey stepped in, pushing her cleaning cart. She kept her eyes down, moving to the corner to make space. Samir saw himself in her practiced invisibility. "Hello," he said warmly. "I'm Samir." She looked up, surprised at being addressed. "Maria?" she replied hesitantly. "That's a lot of floors to clean," Samir said, nodding at her cart. 60 through 75, she confirmed with a small smile. "I used to clean 80 through 90, Samir told her, "for 15 years. Her eyes widened with recognition. "You're him, the janitor who became an executive." "Not exactly," Samir corrected gently. "I'm still the same person I always was, just doing different work now." He reached into his pocket and handed her a business card for the visible path. "If you ever want to talk about your journey, or if you know others who might, our door is always open." The elevator stopped at the 60th floor. As Maria wheeled her cart out, she turned back. "Thank you," she said, tucking the card carefully into her uniform pocket. When Samir reached the boardroom, he found it already full. Executives from Nexus, representatives from Al-Farsi Investments, and board members from the Visible Path, including Eduardo and Jessica. Maxwell stood at the head of the table. "Ah, Samir, we were just about to begin." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Your quarterly report, I believe?" Samir took his place, opening his presentation on the tablet. As he looked around the table, at faces that now saw him, truly saw him, he felt the weight of his journey, the losses and gains, the silence and voice, the invisibility and recognition. "Thank you all for coming," Samir began. "The Visible Path has now been operational for 3 months. In that time, we've worked with 62 skilled immigrants, helping them navigate the barriers between their qualifications and appropriate employment." As he continued with statistics and success stories, Samir noticed Al-Farsi watching him with evident satisfaction. After the meeting, as people gathered in small groups, the businessman approached. "You made the right choice, Professor," Al-Farsi said quietly. "When we met 6 months ago, I saw a man regaining his voice. Now I see a man who has found his purpose." Samir nodded thoughtfully. "I spent 15 years cleaning this building, watching life happen around me. I thought I had lost everything that mattered, my identity, my worth, my visibility. But now I understand that those years weren't just an absence. They were a preparation." For this work, Al-Farsi asked. For a complete understanding, Samir replied, of what it means to be seen and unseen, of how systems perpetuate invisibility, of how a single moment of recognition can change everything. He gestured around the boardroom. I could never have created the visible path without having walked through invisibility myself. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Samir remained for a moment, looking at the spot where he had once stood with a cleaning cart, listening to conversations he wasn't meant to hear. The memory felt distant now, like a story about someone else. His phone buzzed with a text from Fatima. CNN confirmed they want to feature the visible path in their special on immigration next month. Samir smiled. Their work was gaining traction, attracting attention from media, corporations, and government agencies. What had begun as his personal journey was evolving into a movement, a systematic effort to recognize and utilize the hidden talents all around us. As he gathered his things to leave, Maxwell approached. Dinner next week to discuss the expansion. Al-Farsi is on board with funding additional centers in Chicago and Los Angeles. I'll be there, Samir confirmed. Walking through the lobby toward the exit, Samir passed the maintenance closet where he had stored his supplies for so many years. The door was open, and inside, a young man was organizing cleaning products. Good afternoon, Samir said, pausing in the doorway. The young man looked up, startled. Oh, hello, sir. Not sir, Samir corrected gently. Just Samir. He glanced at the man's name tag. And you are? David, the young man replied, clearly surprised at being asked. It's good to meet you, David, Samir said, extending his hand. What's your story? As David hesitantly began to speak, Samir listened with complete attention, the kind of attention he had wished for during his years of invisibility, the kind of attention that said, I see you. You matter. Your story matters. In that moment, standing in the doorway of his past while firmly planted in his present, Samir understood that the boardroom moment 6 months ago hadn't just changed his life. It had opened a door for countless others who remained in the shadows, waiting for their chance to step into the light. And in this understanding was the deepest kind of visibility, not just being seen but truly seeing others in return.